Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. I'm Luke Bronin, the mayor of Hartford, and I am proud to stand up here with this coalition of labor and business, of legislators from around the state, with a governor who has shown tremendous leadership on an issue that is of long-term importance to the economic future of this state. You know, we always say that we want our leaders to make tough decisions for the long term. That's what this is about. The economic future of Connecticut depends on getting Connecticut moving again. We have an old infrastructure. We've got an incredible location halfway between two of the largest, fastest growing metro areas in the country, but we can't take advantage of that competitive position when it takes longer today to get from New Haven to New York by rail than it did a century ago, when 70% of our roads are in poor condition. We need a long-term, sustainable, reliable funding source to fund the infrastructure improvements that are vital to this state's economic future. We all know that the conversation about tolls is tough, but it's the right thing to do. And anybody who's been talking about the importance of growing this state and of improving the business climate in Connecticut has got to recognize that there is nothing more important to improving the business climate of this state than making it possible to move people and goods around this state faster. This is about economic growth. It's about smart investment. It's about making the tough choices now that will secure the long-term future of our state. So I am proud to stand here with this broad coalition to say that we need to do now what we should have done decades ago, what every state around us has done, and what every state that's going to position itself competitively for the decades ahead is already doing. So I want to thank again Governor Lamont for your courage and your leadership in tackling this tough but overdue conversation, in setting out a clear vision for how we're going to get Connecticut moving again, and making sure that we position Connecticut to grow once again. So with that, let me first ask a representative of the private sector, Darrell Harvey, CEO of the Ashforth Company, to come up and give his perspective on why, to grow Connecticut, we got to get Connecticut moving again. Darrell?
Thanks very much, Luke, and delighted to be here, and I commend the governor again for bringing this group together. It's a particularly important, well, let me explain first. I'm Darrell Harvey, and I run a commercial real estate company in Stamford, Connecticut. I've been a 41-year resident of Connecticut. I'm also a long-term board member on the Business Council of Fairfield County. Been chairman of the board of the Stamford Hospital, which is the biggest employer in Stamford. So I'm very familiar with why companies come to Connecticut, why they choose to either stay or leave, and why employees are either happy working here or aren't. I've been working on transportation issues with the Business Council for the last 40 years. About 20 years ago, we were warned by Michael Gallus that if we didn't relieve our congestion problems and free up our central transportation arteries in the state of Connecticut, that we would likely end up as an economic cul-de-sac, a dead end. Well, in my opinion, with us having decided not to make those infrastructure improvements needed to avoid that, it's exactly what we've become. That's what's been shown over the last 10 years or so during the recovery, where the rest of the country recovered and we didn't. We were an economic cul-de-sac, and Jim Smith and his commission have shown that very clearly with their results. But this bill, we believe, in the business community and the Business Council believes, is a real chance to turn that around. This bill is particularly important because it is absolutely earmarked through the lockbox to go to infrastructure, transportation, development. This is not going to be, it cannot be, and we wouldn't support it if it were going to be diverted into something else. So that's number one. Number two, it's a possibility of doing this with public-private partnerships, which is to many people a really sore subject. I just want to say, if you're new to learning about it, There are plenty of examples where it hasn't worked. There are plenty of examples where it does work very effectively. And when it comes to transportation and roads, there are numerous examples where it's worked very well, where we're able, as a state that is really does not have the money to fund itself, to be able to bring in private capital to help fund these improvements. So the two things that it does that are critical are it'll help decongest our roads. The use of congestion pricing has been proven to work. The technology is improving on it day by day, and there are terrific opportunities and great examples of how this can be done. So it's hard to imagine, but think of being able to free up for our employees and for everyone riding, truckers, everybody, to have these highways allow you to get where you're gonna go at a reasonable time. And congestion pricing as a user fee does accomplish that, and there's plenty of evidence that that can be done. So that's particularly important because it starts freeing up the highways at the right times and diverting traffic to hours when commuters aren't trying to get to their jobs. So that's particularly important. The other is it creates a revenue stream for the funding of 30-30-30, the governor's program for 30-30-30-minute travel times between Hartford, New Haven, Stamford, and New York City. This is absolutely critical. 20 years ago, no one cared if they were near the station in our area. They were happy to drive, everyone drove. Now I have to pay for private shuttles to be able to get people from buildings that are removed from train stations to get to the train stations so that the people can get to work. They would much prefer to take the train, but as Luke indicated, the trains are running now slower than they were in 1976, and that's what our statistics show. So 30-30-30, the Business Council and I have been working on extremely hard over the last 8 years. This bill will provide a revenue source for funding the improvements that we need, the investments we need to make 30-30-30 a reality, particularly the 100-year-old bridges, which there are 5, which need to be rebuilt. We can get the funding for that by using this revenue stream as long as it's clearly directed for this purpose and is able to attract the private capital that we need and to build them on budget and ahead of schedule. And in that regard, which is also particularly important, we'd like to see these projects, both the tolls and the 30-30-30 improvements that need to be made, done in a way that resembles more the Tappan Zee Bridge, which was done with a public-private partnership, the repairs and rebuilding of that, which came in under budget and ahead of schedule, as opposed to something like the financially disastrous Big Dig in Boston. This bill lays all that out as a possibility, so that's very exciting from our point of view, and we think it provides a tremendous opportunity for Connecticut to start rebuilding its infrastructure, which is absolutely essential to getting the state growing again. And the business community, I'm happy to talk with the people who are concerned about where the money's going, because that is a valid concern. It's been a big concern of the business community. And I believe the bill's written in such a way, and the governor has assured me he's so committed to the funds being spent as directed in this bill, that we have great confidence that this could be a new beginning for a much needed investment in our infrastructure throughout the state of Connecticut. I'll finish by saying we're Fairfield County, but this is throughout Connecticut. We are not getting professors at Yale because it's too long for them or their spouses to be able to get to New York City, so professors are choosing to go to colleges in New York City versus going to New Haven. 9 of our 10 biggest cities are on the rail line, so a higher speed transit is clearly a way to get people off our highways, to help decongest them, and to be able to connect the various cities of Connecticut with each other. So I think it's a particularly optimistic way of getting Connecticut growing again. And delighted to be here, and I thank you, Governor, again for having put this coalition together. Thank you.
there are a number of mayors here, and I just want to acknowledge we have Mayor O'Leary from Waterbury, who is also the president of Conference of Municipalities. We have Mayor Michael Passero from New London. We have Rudy Marconi from Ridgefield. We've got big cities and small towns alike who are supportive of this, because every community around the state feels the impact of an aging infrastructure and has seen the benefits of those fixes. You look in Waterbury as what's happened because of that I-84 project, eliminated construction that was constricting Waterbury for many, many years. You look at what's happened on the Hartford line with usage that far exceeded expectations. We see the impact in every community. And so I just want to acknowledge also Joe DeLong, the Executive Director of the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. So this will make a difference for every community. But this is also about jobs. And so to speak next, we've got Don Schubert, the president of the Connecticut Construction Industries Association. Don.
Thank you, Mayor. Governor, it's a pleasure to be here with you again. And Governor, we can't thank you enough for showing real leadership on this issue and moving Connecticut in the right direction. The Mayor's absolutely right. You know, for the construction industry, we're the initial return on investment for transportation investments. But transportation investments also affect every sector of the Connecticut economy. We had a report commissioned in 2017 that showed how transportation investments affect advanced manufacturing, how they affect financial services and insurance, how they affect tourism, and how it affects Connecticut as a whole. It's a pleasure to be here today as a construction industry advocate, because the construction industry, frankly, is ready to go to work. We can fix this. We can get this job done. And it's also important for me to be here today as a transportation advocate, because for years we've talked about the need for transportation in Connecticut. We've talked about the benefits for transportation in Connecticut. And what we always stop at is how we're going to pay for it. Well, there's two things to take away from today. In order to fix transportation in Connecticut, we need net new revenues. And this is the only proposal we have seen that doesn't saddle the taxpayers of Connecticut with 100% of the bill. So, Governor, again, it's a pleasure to be here. I thank you all for your leadership, and thank you.
Said earlier that stunning statistic that it takes longer to get from New Haven to New York today by rail than it did a century ago. And if you've driven on 95 or the Merritt lately, you can say the same thing's probably true by road. To speak next, somebody who has been a tremendous advocate for strengthening our cities as centers of economic growth, but also for transit fairness, for multimodal transit, the co-chair, House Chair of the Transportation Committee, Representative Roland Lamar.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everyone who's here today. This is a difficult conversation that's time has finally come. We need to recognize what states across the country have done, which is recognize that transit unlocks economic opportunity for every one of its residents. We've known that here in Connecticut, but we failed to invest for it. We failed to create the vision and the reality that our residents need. And it's not a Republican issue or a Democratic issue. This is not a political issue. I chair a committee that saw proposals from Republicans and Democrats to expand rail lines throughout Metro North. Republican and Democratic first selectmen and mayors came here asking for additional train stations. They came here asking for additional stops on Fast Track. Republican and Democratic legislators asked for additional trains up to the New Canaan line or on the Waterbury line. We all know the importance and need of substantial transportation investment at this point in our state's economy and for our future. But where we might disagree is how urgent it is and the revenue we need and where it comes from. And frankly, we've got a proposal in which 40% of our costs will be paid for by the folks who live out of Connecticut, who come here every day, that want to be in Connecticut, that want to come to our great beaches, to our great tourist attractions, to visit our cities, to visit our colleges, to come to our great healthcare institutions. Right now, they're getting stuck in traffic because our folks are trying to get to work. Ultimately, we need to create a transit infrastructure that allows everyone to get where they're going. and we need to build the economy that supports where our state wants to go. And I look outside my office window here at the Capitol. I stare back at I-84 overpass that is marked with crumbling foundation that needs dramatic investment to get that road up to par. I live in New Haven, close to 2 train stations, that we finally have the Hartford rail lines getting folks connected in New Haven up to Hartford and Springfield and beyond. But we know that that train ride takes 25% longer than it did from New Haven to Grand Central than it did just 20 years ago. And we know that if we don't invest in the future, people will choose other locations. Across the country, folks are making choices on where they live. They want to be close to transit. They want to be close to jobs. They want to be close to innovative centers. We have that capacity here. Connecticut has always been an innovative place, but our transportation infrastructure has held us back. This is the way we build our future. We build it together. We do it in a way that really connects with the folks who are making the decision where they're going to live for the rest of their lives, and we build a Connecticut that works for everyone. And I am excited for this public hearing. It's going to kick off in just a few minutes. We're going to hear from a lot of people who've got a lot of concerns about how we're investing our dollars. But we know we have a solution. We know we can get Connecticut moving again. And with the governor's leadership, our House and Senate caucuses, we'll work together to get a bill over the finish line this year. Thank you all for coming out.
So we heard earlier from the Construction Industries Association, but it's important to say that the jobs that will be held by folks working on these projects are our neighbors in every community of this state, and we have a number of representatives of labor here today. We've got representatives for the building trades, carpenters, laborers, and to represent labor today and to talk about the importance of these jobs to Connecticut residents in every community. We've got Keith Brothers, the business manager of the Connecticut Laborers District Council. Keith.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Governor, thank you for your leadership. We appreciate it. As we mentioned earlier, Luke Bronin mentioned the coalition. The labor piece of what's happening today and what's going to happen into the future is what's important to the residents of Connecticut. Far too often as a labor leader, and my job is to create employment for my members, people I represent. Far too often I hear my members are working in Massachusetts, we're working in Rhode Island, the brothers and sisters I represent, they're working in New York. So the components and the success that those states have, we don't have in Connecticut. We're not investing today for the future of our workers in our state tomorrow. That needs to happen, and it starts today. Governor, we've been with you from the beginning through the campaign. You've talked about creating jobs, keeping workers in Connecticut, jobs in Connecticut. That's what we're looking for. That's why my brothers and sisters showed up today to support you. We're with you 100%. We appreciate what you're doing. Let's get it done.
And now to those who are going to get it done. We have a lot of legislators up here and a lot of legislators who have spoken courageously about this issue. But I want to acknowledge, first of all, from the great city of Hartford, State Representative Matt Ritter, our Majority Leader of the House. And I want to ask to come up now the Speaker of the House, Representative Joe Arasimowicz. Mr. Speaker.
And normally I ask Marty to come right up with me because I know he'll be speaking, but I'm sure Luke will get to him. Look, two of the most important things we have as elected leaders is protection of our residents and prosperity of our residents. When it comes to transportation, we are failing on both counts. Walk behind this building, take a few pictures. I've urged you repeatedly to go back there and look. We have a decaying infrastructure here in the state of Connecticut. The viaducts themselves require $20 million a year in just upkeep. While other states were investing in infrastructure, improving their infrastructure, we sat idly by the side. Now our residents are going to Boston, where the big dig was, and we laughed, and it's over budget and over deadline. But while they were doing it, they were installing fiber optics. They were reclaiming land. They were forging partnerships with institutes of higher learning. We just sat here and did nothing. God forbid the time comes where we have another tragedy here in the state of Connecticut. I want it on my conscience that I came here and I pleaded, I begged for infrastructure improvements. Tolls, federal law requires they go into the roads that they're gathered on. They cannot go anywhere else. That's a guarantee to the residents beyond the lockbox. But let's talk about prosperity. Our kids are leaving. I knock on doors each and every year. I talk to people, and they're, how do we keep the kids here? Give them a reason to be here. Give them the jobs. They don't want to sit in a car ride. I stayed overnight because I had to speak in Norwalk this morning. It's an hour drive. But if I tried to go there in the early morning, I would not have made it. Let's be firm in our convictions. And this governor has taken a courageous leap. There's a difference between being a politician and being a leader. A leader gives you information, even though when he knows you don't like it, but in his heart and his mind, he believes it's right for the state. It would have been very easy for this administration to punt it over to the legislators. Marty and I have been getting beat up for a few years on this. We would have taken a few more because we believe it's right. But to throw himself into the fray because he looked at the information, talked to the groups, talked to DOT, is a courageous move. Very courageous. And not many people would do it because the rewards will not be felt before the next election is up. So I know it's a difficult conversation. We all feel passionately about it. We don't try to mute voices. We want to hear it all. But please, respect the leadership shown by this governor, respect where we want to get to a state, and respect the process. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker, for your longstanding and strong leadership on this issue. We have many representatives, we have many senators here, and I want to acknowledge Majority Leader Bob Duff, who is here. And now ask to add his voice, a leader in our Senate who has been strong on this issue for a long time, Senator Marty Looney.
Thank you, Mayor Bronin. Anyone who is not committed to tolls in 2019 is not committed to dealing with our infrastructure problem regarding our roads and bridges. They may only be posturing about it, but they're not committed to finding a real solution. We have to find a way and a new revenue stream that has to be tolls. Now, again, they won't actually be on the roads collecting revenue for several years, as the Speaker mentioned, but it is important, and I also commend the leadership of the governor on this issue. We have to have a new stream of revenue. Everyone is concerned about our level of bonded indebtedness. If we have the stream of toll revenue, we will have revenue dedicated to help paying transportation bonds, and we'll also have some projects that can be paid directly through the toll revenue that we will not have to bond, which is also important as well. It'll mean jobs during the construction period, but the problem is one that has deteriorated greatly. We look back to what happened with the Mianus River Bridge in 1983. Up to that time, state government was often scaling back on needed maintenance. At that time, our highway system was only 25 years old, except for the Merritt and Wilbercross parkways that were older. After the Mianus River Bridge collapsed, all of the objections that had previously existed to creating a transportation fund and making a massive investment disappeared overnight. We do not want to wait for another tragedy of that proportion or worse before we take this on. It's important to lead. It's important to recognize that this is a problem that we have to address, that we can't just stand back and see how things develop and just let it roll on and hope that it doesn't become a critical issue. This is the year that we have to make that commitment because, again, it will take some time for tolls to actually be on the roads and generating that revenue stream. And our gasoline tax is proving to be increasingly inadequate as a major resource to do that. Thanks because of the good environmental concerns of some drivers who are buying electric cars or hybrid cars or more fuel-efficient gas cars. The revenues from the gas tax project to be flat in years to come as our infrastructure needs go up and up and up. I don't think anyone wants to increase the gas tax to astronomical proportions that would have to be necessary. And again, if we were to do that, we would be placing the burden entirely on Connecticut residents who are the ones who pay the gas tax. One of our problems all along is that out-of-state drivers drive more than a third of the miles on our highways and pay nothing for that use. tolls will collect that revenue. So we need to recognize that. I think that it's important when we do adopt tolls that we actually reduce the gas tax at the same time in order to target relief more to Connecticut residents who are the ones most burdened. But it is critical for us this year to line up with the governor's leadership and move forward the concept of tolls, because the clock is ticking and it's not something that we can get the revenue from overnight. But the longer we wait, the more critical the problem becomes. So the Speaker and I have been advocating this for a long time. We're so pleased that the governor is leading on this issue this year, and we have to move on it in 2019. It is a state emergency.
Governor Lamont, we heard you say many times over the last year that our #1 goal is to turn the moving trucks around and make sure that those businesses and residents that have been here are staying here and that we're recruiting others from around the country and around the region. And I want to thank you for making clear that you're willing to put action behind those words, make the tough decisions, the tough recommendations to secure Connecticut's economic future. I've got 3 daughters. I have 3 kids, 2 daughters, 1 son. I want them to live in Connecticut when they're my age, when they're 20, 30, 40. I want them to raise their kids here. If that's going to be true, it's going to be because the group that's up here today stood up here and had the courage to make investments in Connecticut's long-term future. And Governor, just want to say thank you for having the leadership to stand up, make the tough recommendation, and lay a clear path to what we need to do. Governor Lamont.
All right, good morning, everybody. Listening to the folks I'm with here today just reminds me why what we're doing is so important. We've got to bring our infrastructure, we've got to bring our transportation into the 21st century, and we have to do it now. I'm surrounded by folks. We have a number of mayors. Luke, thank you for what you're doing here in Hartford and Waterbury and Ridgefield. Who else? Hey, New London. It reminds you how transportation brings our cities back to life. We make our cities back into the transportation hubs they were in years past. We make that around affordable housing. We allow people in and out. We grow our cities, and that allows the state of Connecticut to start growing jobs again. That's been a long time coming over the last generation, and that's why we're in the pickle that we are today. You've heard from Keith and the laborers. This is about jobs. This is about jobs. Thank you for the folks here in this room. We're meaning to keep you very busy doing something very important over the next generation, rebuilding our transportation system for the 21st century. That involves training, and that involves a recurring revenue stream that allows us to get this paid for over a period of time. I'll also tell you, when it comes to that recurring revenue stream, I had the opportunity to be down in Washington last week. I saw Vice President Pence. The one thing he said loud and clear is there will be an infrastructure bill that comes out of Washington, D.C. in this next cycle. And woe be it for Connecticut if we're not at the front of the line with design and a recurring source of revenue to make sure we take advantage of what that is to rebuild Connecticut for the 21st century. And you've heard from the business community. You've heard from Darrell. You'll hear from Jim Smith, who's testifying later. This is so key to economic growth and opportunity in this state. Again, over the last 30 years, we really haven't added any net new jobs. And shame on us. What that has cost us as a state, what that means in terms of revenues, what that means in terms of our budget, what that means in terms of opportunity, and that's going to change. You heard Darrell say how vital it is. Every single business that he's trying to get into this state from the real estate side, they ask about gridlock. They say, is this a state that's slowly getting its act together when it comes to transportation? Will our rails be going faster? Will we end the gridlock on our highways? Will our employees be able to get to work? Will our customers be able to visit? And the answer to that is yes. We're showing you that path here today. Jim Smith, same thing. He's been lending to companies all across the state. He was co-chairman of the Fiscal Commission that included most of our major business leaders across the state. And they said why it is so vital. If you're going to get this state going, growing again, you've got to get it moving again. And that's what we mean to do here today. Look, it's tough. I hate to say we got to pay our bills. And we haven't done that in this state. We've been putting everything on the credit card. We've been leaving it for yesterday. We've been saying if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Let's leave it for another time. No rush. Let's do it later. That's what's gotten us into the situation we are today. And it's our opportunity in this generation to take the lead right now. We've come forward with a plan that includes electronic tolling that's got a lot of support from the Democrats. I also was reading from Len Fasano. There's some interest perhaps from some type of tolling. I'm looking forward to working on a collaborative basis to come up with a real recurring revenue stream that doesn't add to our GO and bonded debt on that side, that allows us to plan for the 21st century. And we're not going to get there in the next 2 years or 4 years or even 6 years, but you're going to know where we're going. You know where the state's going to be looking like. You know how your employees are going to be able to get to work. And we're going to take advantage of the amazing assets this state has, our geographic location, the gateway to New England, the gateway to New York and the metropolitan area. With Joe Giletti at the helm in transportation, we're going to be able to start speeding up those trains over the next few years. I've got to give people a sense of direction that this is where they want to be. This is where they want to start their business. This is where they want to grow their family. And it starts right here, right now, by getting our transportation system going. Thank you all for being here. I so appreciate it. I guess so, sure.
Your administration keeps pushing back at the Republican alternative, saying that that would rely on borrowing and the state would continue to incur significant interest costs. Under your plan, are you saying with toll revenue, Connecticut would be paying cash for transportation infrastructure, or you'd be saving interest money by doing less?
Hey, Carlo, thanks for coming. Good to see you. No, just the opposite. I've heard some plans that say, look, let's just add to our bonding against on the general obligation bond. The exact wrong thing to do. That's why our fixed costs are going through the roof. That's why I've strongly said we got to go on a debt diet. And what we need to do for transportation is have a new revenue stream, and we would be able to borrow against that. We'd be able to put together public partnerships that would allow us to leverage that. We'd be able to leverage the money coming out of Washington, D.C., and if we're able to get, $800 million, $1 billion a year in ongoing revenue out of tolls, $400 million of which would be paid by out-of-staters, that allows us to hit the ground running by leveraging that several-fold and really make an enormous difference in terms of speeding up our rail and decongesting our highways.
The federal government has not had a plan in many years. What happens if they do not have it now and there is no federal money for you to do these
Then we'll
projects?
work on our public-private partnerships. We'll be able to leverage the revenues we're getting from the tolling, and we'll be able to hit the ground running. I'm not going to allow the dysfunction in Washington, D.C. to slow up what we got to do here in Connecticut right now.
I've been hearing some of the comments in the back from people who have said, well, why not just cut spending? Why not do that? Is that enough to pay for what we need to do?
Absolutely not. That's the type of a kick in the can. Look, Joe Giletti's going to be like a hawk when it comes to looking how we invest those dollars and give the taxpayers confidence that every dollar is going to improving our productivity and speeding up our transportation system. I've got to give you confidence that we're taking care of that. But there's no way we can put off the investments we've got to make to fix our transportation system. I hear it from business, I hear it from labor, I hear it from people far and wide. This is an investment that's long overdue.
Governor, we've been hearing a lot from our Fox 61 viewers asking, the minute that revenue numbers don't meet projections, are they going to raise the toll? Are they going to raise the fee? Can you put a mechanism, or are you open to putting a mechanism in place that would assure people that this is not a direct pipeline into their pockets?
Well, there are a number of ways we can do this, Matt. One is if we have a public-private partnership, a lot of that risk is taken by our private partner in terms of revenues coming in. But I've got to give people confidence. They have no confidence sometimes in the political world that our word is good, and we're going to make good on this. And we're going to do what I can to make sure that your dollars are well invested going forward.
But will there be a mechanism mechanism in place to make sure that there's a cap, that it doesn't just infinitely get raised?
Well, let me talk to the legislators. If that helps allay people's concerns, this is money going to make our state more productive and faster moving, I'll think about that, absolutely.
Are you willing to commit today that if the legislature fails to approve a tolling plan, that you will not go forward with the tolling study and preliminary groundwork that Governor Malloy ordered and funded or secured funding for?
Yeah, if the legislature says more of the same, kick the can, let's not do anything, let's jack up the gas tax. If they say no, then why would I do a tolling study?
Governor, in your
That answer
tolling
your
plan, in the plan that you guys are coming up with, will you commit today to say if it's going to be all cars or just trucks? Have you guys decided?
Look, I think if you really want to do 30-30-30, you want to take all the legal and regulatory risk off the table, it's going to be cars and trucks. We're waiting to see what comes out of the Rhode Island legal case. I thought it'd be resolved by now. As you know, Rhode Island tolls just trucks. We said that a year ago. We said that 6 months ago. I think right now, if you want to do 30-30-30 and make the real investments for the future, we're going to find a way to do cars and trucks with a maximum discount for Connecticut drivers.
Are you going to take into account what people are saying at the hearing today, or is that decision made already?
Say that one more time.
Are you going to take into account what people have to say today, or is that already been a decision that's made?
Look, I always take into account what people have to say. I got to get a majority in the legislature. I know it's unpopular. I know that people are going to be paying a little bit more. People don't want to do that. They think there's a magic wand or another way we can do this. I'm going to do everything I can to reach out, have that door open I've always talking about, and we'll learn along the way. But at the end of the day, I feel very strongly we have to put in this recurring revenue stream to invest in transportation. It's the best way to get jobs back in the state of Connecticut.
Does anyone agree with Marty Looney that in the longer run, maybe in your second term, that the gas tax can go down?
I think that's something you can look at. We'll see how that balances out. I think it makes some sense. I can tell you, you look at what other states are doing, because they all have transportation infrastructure problems. Ohio, under a Republican governor, is going to raise their gasoline tax by something like 40 cents. Michigan, about 30 or 40 cents as well. So that's not the way we want to go in this state. People can drive through this state. We're a pass-through state, and the gas tax doesn't get the job done. Whether we can reduce it over time, I think that makes some sense. Let me just leave you with this thought. I'm so proud to be here with everybody in this room, standing up here. Look, nobody likes, raising revenues for whatever noble purpose it is. But this is the best investment this state can make. This is something that will make an enormous difference for our kids and going forward. We haven't added a net new job in a generation, and transportation is one of the big reasons we're falling behind. I'm not going to let that happen. Now let's get to work. Thanks, everybody.